All right, everyone. This is going to be the second Thematics Division seminar for the Hub. This seminar is going to be tackling run construction. Luna is going to be leading this one. I will be watching the Twitch chat to see if there are any questions that pop up. If you guys want to ask questions here, we would like if you could give us a ping in the game chat so we don't have people talking over each other. We'll try to get to you as soon as we can. All right, sounds good. Luno, take it away.
All right, so I know in the past, especially with GM apps, we've had problems where a lot of people don't really understand, how to set up a run or have a hard time building a run. So this talk is sort of about the basics and a structure to help people come up with a basic run. This isn't the only way to do it, and this isn't the way you have to do it, but this is how I've done it and I found helpful for me. So a great place to start, I usually find, is, so what is what? What is the objective and why runners? So, like I said, you need to figure out, are they stealing something? Are they extracting someone? Are they reverse extracting someone, implanting someone into a company? And once you have what they're doing, you need to ask yourself, why runner? Why runners is one of the biggest issues we see in TD when we deny props, TD and IPAR, is it's just, why would Shadowrunners do it? Why would you not pay mercenaries or gangers or etc.? So the next thing you really need to do is the who's. So first thing you should ask is, who is the Johnson? That determines a lot about how much they're going to pay, how they're going to act, where they're going to do the meet, and that also does inform the why runners question. A syndicate isn't going to be able to hire legitimate people to do something. It also influences the meet a lot, like I said. You can get these, situations where, like Ares Johnsons, for example, are well known to just be Ares Johnsons and to be open about being Ares who's hiring. You can also get situations where someone then pretends to be an Ares Johnson because Ares is known to be open when they hire you. Is this a private individual who is just rich and wants you to do some crazy shit for them because they're, crazy rich and they want insane things to happen? Things like that. It also affects what happens if the runners fuck up. So, for example, failing, again, going back to Ares, I like to use Ares a lot. Failing Ares is not necessarily the biggest deal in the world. They're probably not going to kill you, probably not going to have you killed. They're going to be annoyed, but you fail, say, the mob or the yacht, they're going to be pretty pissed at you, and they might take some shots at you, things like that. So then the next who, again, who is the target? So are they a AAA, a AA, a single A, unranked, gangers, an individual? Who is getting hit? If you're picking a AA or a AAA, really look into that company and figure out what's special about them. Like what makes them special? Like if you're hitting Federated Boeing, for example, they do aircraft, they do drones. You're going to expect a Federated Boeing facility to have a lot of drones and be a little heavier on the drone security than the meat security side, physical security. And you'd expect them to be weaker on magical security than, say, an Az Technology or Wu Jing. If you're going against Wu Jing, you best be expecting a significant background count in that facility. In spirits and watchers and all the good magical security that's going on. And you get, other weird quirks with various companies. So, like, for example, Evo has a internal combat league where they encourage people to get, just random people in the company to get cyberware for combat. So, Jen from HR, turns out she's really into that combat league, and she has titanium bones and ortho skin, and wired reflexes too. So things like that. Also, you gotta remember,
Hey Luna, if you're talking, I lost you there.
hello?
All right, we're back in it.
Oh, did I cut out?
Just for a moment.
Okay. Yeah, I had to put on like background noise or something. My headset auto turns off if there's no sound. There we go. Sorry about that. So next thing is, single A corps. These are probably the bread and butter, what as a GM is going to get run a lot. As a player, you would see the most, simply because you can have a lot of fun with these, because there's not, you can make up a single A corp. And again, it's going to be very different security than a double A or a triple A, because again, you got to remember, single A can't do things like APDS, or if they do, they have to be very careful about how they do it. They're going to have, whatever that single A specializes in is going to determine what type of security they're good at. So like, if the single A is a finance company, I'm not expecting them to be, don't expect them to have great magical security. But I bet their matrix side security is going to be good, because they're dealing with financial stuff, so that's what they think about. Things of that nature. Then you start to get into like gangs and syndicates, and you could have a crazy good time there with just insane ideas. But yeah, but you gotta think about, what are their quirks, their strengths, their weaknesses, and response styles. Then the next big, how to phrase it, thing to think about is the where. Where is the bulk of the action going to be taking place on the run? If you're hitting a facility, you need to think about that facility. Where in Seattle is it located? Is it extraterritorial? Is it not? If it's not extraterritorial, what type of zone is it? Do these guys have a good relationship with KE? Who is their security company? If it's a Lone Star Guard, if the facility has a Lone Star contract, KE might not be as quick to respond than if they had, say, a KE contract. Things of that nature are what you got to think about. Like this is, and like the type of AAA facility. So is this a AAA black site, or is this a, just like a regular AAA office? Because the black site's not going to be downtown, but the office isn't going to be deep in Paola. So just things you got to think about there. And you got to like look at it, figure out where that makes sense. And you also need to think about where it is in terms of getting reinforcements. Because again, AA's and AAA's have multiple offices in Seattle, and not every office is going to have, the HDR team standing by at it. That's going to be deployed out of one of the big buildings, one of their main facilities. So that kind of determines like how long HDR response time is for your AA or AAA building. So next part is legwork. Think about like the legwork they can do. And this is kind of a bigger section. So the first thing to think about there is how the team can get information on this facility or their target or the group they're going after and what that means. So the go-to start is always matrix searches. And so, there's the T1, 3, and 6. You can do, based on the rules, you can do things where you adjust dice pools based on those, what they're trying to search for. But something to remember with this is that a T6 is not a I know everything button. the T6 is somewhat limited. And some players will try to get absolutely everything they can about a person from a T6, and that's not necessarily the case. The T6 is a very powerful tool for the runners, but it should give them hooks to keep investigating, not necessarily all the info. So it should give them obviously certain things. This person has things like comm numbers and pictures of people or things. If it makes sense that they got accidentally posted publicly at some point, then yes, it's quite possible you would get them in the T6. But you're not going to get things like security contract details from a T6. You might figure out, this facility has Sakura Security as their security company because the dudes with submachine guns standing at the door have a little Sakura on their jacket, a little cherry blossom. That's God. Ugh. So things like that.
Just take a second if you need it. It's all right.
Yeah, saying Sakura instead of cherry blossom. Another important thing to think about in the Matrix legwork land is hosts and comlinks. So most facilities have hosts, but not all facilities have hosts, and not all things will have hosts. You have to remember that even a rating 3 or 4 host quite possibly costs someone their life. Hosts are these very bizarre things in the lore, right?
Hey, sorry, Luno, to pause your train of thought, but we're getting a question from Chopper. If you could just quickly repeat the Matrix search stuff, he missed it.
Oh yeah, I can repeat parts of that. So, T1, 3, and 6, each one of them gives you a certain amount of information, right? So the T1 gives you very surface level. It's like typing someone's name or something's name into Google. And it's very quick, and you get basically their PR stuff or the stuff they really give no crap about covering up. A T3 search is like going, and actually looking at unindexed sites, getting some more info, but things that are still publicly posted in places or posted in a way that you don't need to search super, super hard for. So you would get things like, if somebody posted to a non-standard social media or had a fan website of something, stuff like that. Or if there was like a deep web, darknet site dedicated to X thing. The T6 is where you get into this weird place where it is sometimes described by people as anything that ever happened on the Matrix involving X thing, and that's not really the case. It's anything that ever happened publicly. So you're looking at like deleted posts. So if somebody put some pictures up on their social media of the inside of a facility and then deleted them, you can get those in theory. It is not the I win at everything button that it sometimes is tried to use as. So keep that in mind when you're giving info from there. And you should have some ideas of what you're probably going to give from some searches, but a lot of the Matrix legwork stuff with searches is going to have to be somewhat on the fly, somewhat, what's the word? Not ad-libbed, but you good, Chopper? Okay, he's good. So back to host. So what do the ratings really mean? So if you look at the core rulebook, it has that page of various hosts and their ratings and what they mean and like what typically has them. And I agree with most of what that says. I mean, it's the book, so it's right. But you do have to remember with hosts that they literally cost people their lives to build. Probably. The mechanics of building a host and raising its rating are insane and terrifying. So you would see like unrated corps may not have a host simply because they're incredibly expensive. inside the host, you have to think about the design of it. So what is slaved and what is not slaved to a host, right? You know, are the cameras on the outside of the building slaved to the host? That's a big question. You know, does this company feel like they would be able to spot people trying to hook into their cameras? If they think they would see people trying to run, a cable right up to a camera, then they might slave the cameras on the outside to the host because they're more afraid of someone trying to remote hack the cameras, from across the street. Um, things like that. How many spiders do these guys have on hand? And why? Why do they have these spiders? Is if you're going up against an unranked, their odds of having a spider on hand at all times is kind of low unless that's what they do. Unless they're like a Matrix hosting company or a Matrix security company. Their odds of just having someone, it's expensive. It's expensive to have a spider, and it's a dangerous job. And you have to pay for their deck and things like that. So they're more likely to have, a spider who respawn, but who's not like actively checking the host out. And also spiders, do you have a decker or do you have a technomancer? Technomancer is going to cost a lot more, in salary than the decker. And are they really going to be better for what you're doing? Thinking about what's going on in that host and why technomancers are great if you need to secure a file for short terms in super secure ways and you're moving data in weird ways. But they're not as great at stopping, a decker once the decker's in the host. The next is part about the host you really got to think about. Ooh. Oh, something else. Next thing you really got to think about is ice in the host. So you have, the three types, white, gray, and black. And you got to ask, well, who owns this host and why would they be running? What type of ice would they be running? So usually you can kind of follow the same kind of idea that goes on with territory as, hosts in terms of like what drones are rolling with. So if you're going into a AAA or a AA host, you can expect that there is for sure gray ice. Like if you're designing it, for sure there's going to be gray ice loaded somewhere. Black ice is iffy. It's very much should anyone ever be in this host and is a minor fuck up worth potentially killing someone over. And that's a balancing act because you got to remember these companies are all about PR. If you're looking at a single A or an unrated corp, there's almost no way they're going to have black ice. It's too risky for them because they still have to abide by, UCAS or CAS or NAN law. There's no getting out of accidentally killing someone for them. Or intentionally killing someone. I mean, they can bribe their way out, but it looks very bad. See what else? Oh yeah. After that, also what ice is actively running. Again, is this host something that is expected to get attacked a lot and they want to stop people immediately as soon as they get in the host or not? If they're not expecting all that many attacks, they don't necessarily need to stop people instantly, probably most of their attack ice isn't going to be running. You'll see either patrol or bloodhound, maybe a trace running, but you're not gonna see a gray ice or a black ice walking around. That's gonna get launched when the host goes on alert. What else? So then the last part is the files. So, files can either be unprotected, encrypted, and or data bombed. So unprotected files, things that people need to access a lot and you don't want to bother giving everyone a password to it, that's the type of thing that's not data bombed. You would expect, things that everyone needs access to and everyone has access to that aren't security risks would be there. You might expect, meeting schedules, things of that nature. Data bombs are used when people need to access something, but you're fine giving them a password, and it takes them a second to enter the password, but then they get the thing. And it's things that are somewhat sensitive. You don't want just anyone to. And then the final option is then encryption. Encryption is only good for things that are rarely accessed or need to be extremely secure. Because in universe, it takes time to decrypt and unencrypt files. And it's really, it's known to not actually be super effective. In lore, they talk about there's just an algorithm that can defeat any known encryption. And that's what happens when you crack a file. But yeah. Next, thinking about comm links people have. A security guard versus a junior engineer versus a junior scientist versus an accountant versus a head of a lab, you're gonna have different comm links. So think about that. Like a guard is not making a great salary because guards are dime a dozen. So he's probably gonna have like a rating 2 or rating 3 comm link. The chief of security, he's making some money, or she, because they are, the big dog. They're managing people. They're a manager. So they're probably going to have actually a pretty nice comm link, like a 4 or a 5. Top scientists, again, 4 or 5. Also, if there's a specific target, you have to think about that target. Are they vain? Like if they're very vain, you might expect them to buy a nicer comm link than you would expect in their situation. Or if they're the type of person who really doesn't give a shit about tech, they might have a worse comm link. Just something to think about. Astral recon. So a lot of times you see kind of weird stuff with teams either skipping astral or not doing much astral. Astral defenses, most places aren't going to have much more than watchers on hand, and a lot probably won't even have watchers because there's not a whole lot a mage can actually do from the astral other than figure out what your facility looks like. Oh, there's some questions. I'm sorry, I will go back to the file stuff. No, that's so Hidden Dragon asks if any files on a device are viewable from the matrix without a mark on the device. That is not true. You need to get a mark on the device before you can see the files and before you can access them. I believe it's a typo in either core or data trails that hasn't been errated or was errated. I can't quite remember, but I know it's something that one of the writers of the book said was a mistake. Types of files that would have data bombs. The next question. Some that have a data bomb. Someone's personal schedule, if it was on the host, might have a data bomb. Who has access to a specific room or area, because they've got to check when somebody's coming to check. You've got to open the data bomb and look. Encryption takes too long. That's a pain. So you'd expect a data bomb on that though. Encrypted stuff you would expect for like pay data, research materials, research data, things where it's going to be de-encrypted at the start of the day. Someone's going to work on it, add stuff to it, and then when they're done at the end of the day, they'll re-encrypt it and data bomb it. That's something else. It's a living world. There can be cycles. Midday, you've got scientists working on stuff. Files that are encrypted at the, a file might not be encrypted in the middle of the day, but it will be at night. simply because of how people do stuff. People are lazy. The question was for those personal schedules, they would be the data bombs that don't destroy the file. That's totally up to the individual. There's not really a good hard and fast rule set for when a data bomb is going to do damage versus destroy the file. This is sort of a GM use your common sense and figure out how bad is it if this file gets out versus how bad is it if I lose this file. For example, who has access to room whatever is going to be a pain in the ass to rebuild, and it's not actually that big of a deal if it gets out. Now it's a big deal if it gets edited, but it's going to be a pain to rebuild, and people are lazy. Your personal schedule, yeah, that kind of goes back and forth. And whose personal schedule is it too? Lofier's personal schedule is probably going to be set up to do both, right? Because, Lofier. Joe Schmo, the security guard, probably doesn't have a data bomb on his personal schedule. Your head researcher, your security team may have put a data bomb on their schedule for them. And that's likely just to try to brick the device that is trying to hack it. So the next question is, if I'm actively accessing a file like a corp wage slave, would I be able to see someone messing with the file, like a Shadowrunner style? And would I be able to spot, counterspot, alert, avoid altering OPSEC? So that gets into a very ill-defined area of Shadowrun. In theory, once a data bomb is removed from a file, anyone who looks at the file and knew it was data bomb knows that file has been fucked. That raises some questions about well, if X file was data bombed and it's the file for getting into whatever room, well, now you're going to go through and audit that file, and you start hitting a lot of rule zero things where it becomes it becomes borderline impossible for Shadowrunners to do certain things. The wage slave probably can't see someone accessing the file, though if they made a matrix perception and the decker had a real bad logic plus sleaze, it's totally possible that a random wage slave just saw them. Though, again, that's the kind of thing you start asking, well, why was this person doing a random matrix perception, and did they really know this decker is op4? So the answer is typically no, but there are situations where it can happen. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to the astral stuff again. So again, though, like I was saying earlier, how astrally secure a place is depends on who's running it. A woozing facility is going to be fucking terrifying on the astral. They are one of the scariest things in the world. Astrally, they are just full of FU on the astral. Spirits, watchers, wards, background counts, the whole 9 yards. If you're looking at, some unranked or single A rated, matrix security company or matrix hosting company, they might have watchers, they might have nothing, because they don't expect an astral hit, because they're not magically involved themselves. Now, if you're going after, a unrated or single A magical corp, that does either, reagents or formula or something like that, or someone who crafts foci for a living, they're probably going to have some magical security. They would have watchers, either a mage on call or a mage who is on site. Where the mages is also very important because of how watchers work. Watchers have a cycle where they patrol for a while, and then they fly off back to the mage and report it. And then the watcher goes back to what it was doing. So where that mage is located matters a lot. Because if the watcher's flying back inside the facility, the mage is on site. If the watcher's flying off in a random direction, you know that they are not on site. Wards, keep in mind that wards are not exactly cheap. So not everything's going to be warded. And the larger the ward is, the more expensive it is. Large wards get very expensive very quickly because of how the volume of wards is calculated and how volume the cost per volume rapidly starts to get insane for room sizes. So like a couple of rooms warded, not too expensive. A whole warehouse warded is incredibly expensive.
Yeah, I just want to chime in here. Just remember, guys, wards, um, the size is the function of the force. Um, if you take it doesn't really say this very well in the core rulebook, but it says any area of effect spell is going to be the size in meters of the force, and that will apply for rituals as well, like the ward. So I was recently going through a proposition where someone wanted to use a ward to cover the whole entire not a ward, a circle of healing to cover a whole entire facility, and we had to do some math on whether it would. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it gets ritual mages get expensive because of how long a ward takes to set up, and also if you can see the ward, you can use astral tracking to find the mage. So those guys get compensated pretty well for doing it. What else is there? Yeah, that's about it for the astral stuff you need to think about. Social stuff. So that goes back to what type of facility or area or place this is, right? So if this is a black site, you're probably not going to get a whole lot from social. You might, if the black site in Pale Barrens, you can talk to the squatters in the area, maybe get some ideas about the facility, but the runners probably aren't going to be socialing into a black site. If this is a semi-public AAA facility or AA facility, there's lots of ways they can social in. They can pretend to be someone who works there, someone who is there for whatever the semi-public reason this place has for existing is. Things like that. Like, extraterritorial is a lot of fun because you can do a lot of crazy things with social and like how people get in, how people get out. One thing to remember about extraterritorial facilities is that a lot of the time, if you work on an extraterritorial facility, you rarely ever leave that facility. Extraterritorial facilities are pretty self-contained much of the time. Some people do leave it with some regularity. Some people simply will not be allowed to leave it. Your top magical researcher in Seattle is probably not going to be allowed to leave facilities because they're too worried about him getting extracted or her getting extracted or killed or whatever. Rank and file, they're more likely to be allowed out. But if Jane was extracted from Evo last month, Jane's not allowed off corporate property because they're afraid she'll run. So keep things like that in mind. Unrated and single A and syndicate and gang things, you can do a lot of interesting social setups there as well. Unrated and single A's typically, they'll have outside contracted companies doing things like their cleaning or their HVAC or something like that. And you can leave a lot of really neat social engineering ways in for the team, which is always fun. Gangs and syndicates, they're constantly dealing with people. Constantly. You can't be a gang or a syndicate without dealing with people, having people inside your area, either people asking you for things, trying to sell you things of that nature. Because they're business. Things to think about with social engineering, you do need to kind of balance, difficulty and realism. Not everyone is going to be constantly watching the Shadowrunners and asking them questions, but that being said, who the Shadowrunners pretend to be matters heavily for how their social engineering is going to work. Are they someone who is supposed to be out of sight, out of mind? People probably going to pay less attention to them doing something. Are they pretending to be celebrities or something like that? You might expect more scrutiny of that. Someone's pretending to be a celebrity. Someone might check that celebrity's P2.1 page and see where that celebrity's supposed to be. Something that can come up. If they're pretending to be a janitor, the janitor opened up a hatch. What's the janitor doing? I'm fixing the whatever. It's going to work a lot better than, the guy dressed as an accountant or dressed as a celebrity opening up a hatch and saying, I'm fixing whatever. So, just things to keep in mind. Before I keep going, are there any questions? Any specifics people want me to go into more there? I'll give you guys a second to type.
It looks like no one's typing in, and I've checked the Twitch stream. It looks like we're good to move forward.
Cool. So the next thing you want to think about is go time. And like what's going to happen there. You don't want to overly plan this. My philosophy with a lot of go time stuff as the GM is less design and more kind of go with it. And what I mean by that is security is going to have a plan on how they respond with things, but they're not going to have a super detailed specific plan. Their plan is going to be usually some form of containment or stop whatever from getting in the facility or stop whatever from getting out of the facility. So they're going to be very fluid. So when a social thing is happening, as it's happening, there should be realistic interaction. So if you're going into a lab that has very limited access, and you are not disguised as someone who is normally accessing that lab, even if you badge swipe in and you're in the system as being someone who's supposed to be allowed in that lab, someone who regularly works in that lab is going to question why you're there if they see you. And you're probably gonna have to talk through that. And how suspicious they are is very dependent on when it is, what type of lab it is, what they're doing, who the person who saw you is. If it's some junior personnel who saw the runners, they may ask, who are you? Why are you here? And the runners give some BS explanation, and that person is probably going to shrug it off because they're like, I'm never told when we get new people. But if it's the person in charge of the lab, they're going to be like, I wasn't told you are being transferred here. Let me just make a quick phone call type deal. How the runners act matters a lot. A social infiltration went very wrong on my table recently, where the runners were infiltrating an Evo facility pretending to be new transfers. And they gave themselves access to the room they needed to get to, but nothing else. And they got dropped off in front of the facility by some random unranked corporation's limo service, and walked up to the front security and said, "Where's the new transfers?" And the security was like, okay. And security was very confused and decided to bring the runners to the security office to interrogate them. Now, the runners got into a fight with security before they got to the security office, but the runners were in trouble. And unfortunately, that run ended poorly for the runners. So also, one of the things with social, when it goes badly, just because the security has realized you are not who you claim to be does not mean they're going to immediately shoot you. They're going to ask you to come with them. They're going to take you most of the time back to a holding room, and then they're going to interrogate that run. That's for corps. Or they'll turn you over to KE or whatever. Gangs and syndicates are more likely to just shoot you. So keep that in mind. Yeah. But when it goes well, I've seen social infiltrations of sites that I thought were secure be incredibly easy. I had one team infiltrate the evidence locker of a KE precinct by literally pretending to be a KE officer and just having the right combination of knowledge and skills and going in at the right time that it made sense for a KE officer to be going into the evidence locker. You know. Okay, so the question is, so would a corp like Horizon continue to play along with whatever you're trying to do to lure you in more and try to figure out what you're after until once they know something's up? That's pretty common. They'll like a AA or a AAA will almost certainly alert their security that there's a runner team doing a thing. Once they've realized you're a runner, they'll assume you're either a runner or a spy, and they'll probably keep you going, stringing you along, and be watching you. Or if they think they already know what you're here for, what you're doing, they may just bring you straight to the security office. But it's possible they would let you keep going for a little bit to try to figure out precisely what you're doing without having to go through all the interrogation stuff.
There's also kind of a measure of you have to weigh the risk versus reward for a AA or A company who catch a corporate spy. Obviously, they can turn that person into an asset, or same thing for a Shadowrunner if they, can successfully grab them. But if they think that, this person there has information that can't be let out, or or is attempting to sabotage something, kill someone, destroy assets that they want to keep or need to keep, then they might not think twice. For an A corporation, however, that's a little different. They have to abide by the laws of the land, but for AA and up, they can just ventilate you. So it's a little bit of, you have to wait a little bit, risk versus reward for those groups. But they could definitely do it on the fly.
Yeah, and I mean, again, corporations also again have to worry about a little bit about the morale of their own people. So while they can easily ventilate runners, they typically don't want to do that directly in front of their wage slaves. So they may direct you to a place where it's a room and 3 dudes with assault rifles, and the door closes behind you.
The pre-designated murdering everyone room.
Yeah, the room that everyone knows not to walk into if you are supposed to be on the facility. So, yeah, but social can actually be a lot of fun, especially if you play around with the culture of the corporation. So again, Evo is open, is super tolerant about, not tolerance, not exactly the right word, but super open about like lifestyle like unusual lifestyles. There we go. That's and like, you will just see people with lots of weird and unusual cyber and bioware and things of that nature. As technology is a super macho culture, super machismo, things like that, and you can have a lot of fun with that. Ares is super America.
Super America and super military. They call
Yeah.
their different divisions battalions. They'll refer to their managers as sir, stuff like that.
Yeah, you can have a lot of fun, and you can have a lot of fun with like how people respond in an office. Like I said, Evo has the combat league, so someone in this office might be super into the combat league and have some good wear. Ares is super into people having firearms knowledge and training. So one of these guys, when they see the Shadowrunners, this in a non-social thing, the Shadowrunners attacking or whatever, may pull out their Crusader and start trying to go to town on the Shadowrunners, thinking they're a badass in an action movie or an action grid who's gonna stop the runners. Um, you know, lots of crazy stuff. Um, so let's talk a little bit about when a team goes with stealthing. I guess let's start there instead of hot and heavy. So for stealth, again, a lot of times if you're sneaking around a facility and you get spotted, security knows they've spotted someone who was trying to be sneaky and not spotted, and security is going to immediately want to ask you some questions because they haven't been tracking you the whole way in, so they have no idea what you've done. Quite possibly they'll put the building on alert. Quite possibly they will just continue to try to track you on cameras and follow you until some people can walk over and ask you what the hell you're doing and ask you to come with them to the security office. Or just waste you because, it's the middle of the night, no one's in the office, and fuck it.
MCT would do this.
Yeah.
For those who didn't see, Chopper was asking, could Corpse pretend they didn't see you instead of an ambush? Yeah, MCT, zero zones. They would just, start off. They would go. Obviously, not every single MCT facility is a zero zone, but yeah, definitely. Again, you want to have enough knowledge about the corporation that you're using when you weigh these kind of odds, and then take action as appropriate. Um, yeah, sorry, Luna.
No, good. No, it's fine. Yeah. MCT is the one I would really expect that, but yeah, they like killing motherfuckers.
Wuxing too.
So yeah, Wuxing. You would less expect Ares to just ambush and kill you, because one of Ares' things is they tend actually to not kill Shadowrunners as long as the Shadowrunner goes non-lethal. Because one of Ares' big things is having a really good reputation in the shadows, and they want to encourage non-lethality against them. Because it's, if the Shadowrunners get away with X, well, that sucks. But it's a lot better than Shadowrunners get away with X and we lost 15 security guards.
Same thing is true with Horizon. Horizon will go out of their way to use non-lethal means, and they will name and shame runners who don't.
Yeah.
They'll take security footage and they will blast it over the airwaves, and yeah. So
Yeah. Hilarious things like one of the things I love is there's a piece of lore where Seder Krupp is actually more likely to go after you if you fail a run against them than succeed. Because if you succeed, you're a potential asset. If you fail, they don't want to accidentally hire you in the future. Things like that. So security response. So like we're saying, a lot of corporations, if you go non-lethal against them, extraterritorial, they'll come back non-lethal. And they'll usually start non-lethal. Now, notable exceptions to that, MCT. MCT is pretty much always going to try to kill you. MCT, like, there's two philosophies. Well, there's a few philosophies among the megacorps and the various corporations. Unrated corps, single A corps, they're going to be almost exclusively non-lethal unless there's extenuating circumstances. They are basically not allowed lethal ammo. They are allowed it, but it's heavily discouraged, and it often looks very bad for them. And they have to explain, and by explain I mean bribe, away any issues that come up with killing someone by accident or killing the wrong person. So you'll typically see them load up only non-lethal ammo. Gangers and syndicates are all over the place. Turns out stick and shock is actually better than normal ammo for most gangers, so you see them with stick and shock a lot. But the megacorps, the AA's and the AAA's have two philosophies when it comes to Shadowrunners and how to respond to them. You have the MCT way, like I said, which is go lethal and encourage people to not run against you because it's scary and you'll die. Or go for the Ares Horizon way, which is they've accepted the fact that there will always be some idiot dumb enough to take a job against them. So let's encourage them to go non-lethal by shooting non-lethal at them if they're non-lethal. And that way we don't have to replace all these security guards and rebuild this building as it gets blown up by Shadowrunners trying to escape. Again, so most of the time the weapons the security team has will primarily be loaded with stick and shock or gel, and they may have an APDS mag on them, where they may be able to get APDS. Their HTR team is more likely to just have APDS, but it still would not be uncommon for them to have stick and shock. Again, it depends on the corp. Also, something people don't think about a lot, a facility might not have an HTR team on site, but they will have 4 dudes trained to use, FBA and who are a little bit better than their average guard if it's an extraterritorial facility. Next. Oh yeah, cost-benefit analysis. Let's start with escalating to meet the threat. So again, that was the lethal versus non-lethal stuff. Again, escalation happens, but it's not instantaneous. The security team is going to respond to the Shadowrunners doing things. So if the Shadowrunners start throwing HE grenades, they're probably going to get either flashbangs or HE back. They're going to get suppressed. There's going to be more guards coming, more drones. But just because something starts happening with runners in a facility doesn't mean every guard is immediately going to start running towards those runners. They're going to be still trying to secure the facility and prevent the runners from getting out, while some of the guards are trying to prevent them from moving around and containing them. Again, the name of the game with security is containment. Cost-benefit analysis. So, again, you have to remember, corporations exist to make money, and they want to spend as little money as possible on anything they can skimp on. So APDS is not cheap. Stick and shock and gel are super cheap. So again, that's part of the reason they like to use gel and stick and shock. Drones. Steel lynxes are super expensive. And yes, they're really good at protecting your facility, but they're really expensive. And do you really need that when 4 roto drones can cover more area faster for less? Things like that,
Yeah, roto drones go like 60 miles per hour at top speed.
Yeah,
Pro tip.
the steel lynx, it's quick, but it can't, it's not airborne, it's not great over all terrain. If you have a big facility, it's gonna have a hard time getting to the runners. Roto drones will be right there on them. And your security isn't only planning for Shadowrunners, you're planning for corporate spies, you're planning for Halloweener attacks, things like that.
You're planning for employees to do dumb things.
Yeah.
Like, get drunk at the office and start a fight. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that they're usually not going to be tackling a runner team. They're usually going to be tackling, Sam and Jake from HR, they're married, and now they're having a messy divorce. It's spilling over into to their work.
Exactly. Um, let's see. So yeah, gases, pepper punch versus neurostun. I know neurostun has suddenly become kind of a meme on the hub over these past few weeks after some runners got neurostunned. Um, neurostun is not cheap, and it's kind of hard to get. It's kind of a pain to get for a corp. I mean, they can get it. They have supply lines out the ass, but it's expensive and it takes time to acquire. Pepper Punch is basically free, and you can get it literally anywhere. The only time a corp is really going to use Neurostun is when it's something that really, really needs something more than Pepper Punch, which is not a lot of things, or where cleaning up the Pepper Punch becomes problematic, because Pepper Punch is filled with dyes and RFID tags, and it gets everywhere. Neurostun just dissipates and doesn't leave a residue. So, like, a server room is probably not going to have Pepper Punch. I say server rooms aren't so much thing. But, a room where you have stuff that can't get covered in dyes and liquids and stuff, probably not going to have Pepper Punch, probably going to have Neuro stuff. A room where you can hose it down is going to get, Pepper Punched all day. Guards at the front desk. It rains in Seattle all the time, so the Pepper Punch will just wash away from the street. Things like that. Oh yeah, so tactics. Like I was saying, the name of the game is containment and limitation of damage. Security may not go straight at the runners. They may not even go where the runners are going. If the facility has something way more valuable in it than what the runners are after, security's gonna focus on defending whatever that way more valuable thing is. The security will likely follow the runners, like at least a token force will follow behind them, going down the same path the runners just went down. So when the runners go to double back on themselves and go out the way they came in, there will likely be security guards standing there, because whatever the runners compromised, the security knows was compromised because of where the runners are. Or if the runners, blew a hole in a wall, you can expect guards to be standing at that hole in the wall when the runners come back to that hole. Collateral damage. Security teams want to minimize the collateral damage to their own facility, so you often won't see them having things like HE or frag grenades, simply because they just cause damage to the facility. If you're in a office area with like cubicles, like thin-walled cubicles, security team's probably not going to put suppressive fire on you if there's a chance there are still people in there, because they don't want to spray wildly and accidentally kill their own people. Security typically cares, like I said, about their people. Let's see, question. How often possible would a corp use something like a radioactive tracking dye, either to spray on people or an object for tracking purposes? All the time. That is literally one of the uses of Pepper Punch. Pepper Punch is covered in RFID tags and a dye that can be tracked to a specific corp. So if you ever get hit with Pepper Punch, tag erase yourself, because you are covered in tags. It is quite common. Now, whether they'll actually follow through on tracking you down is very dependent on what you stole or what you did. Because again, going back to the cost-benefit analysis, is it worth it for us to spend, $300,000, 300,000 Nuyen, kill 4 runners who stole something? Probably not. Is it worth it for us to kill 4 runners who just killed our CEO? Yes. Because fuck you, you killed our CEO. This is a loss of face thing. It all goes back to cost benefit. Fear. Security teams can and will break. If they're not on like guts or something else, and they're just watching runners mow people down. If there's 15 guards in a room and 12 of them are dead, those last 3 might think twice about shooting at the runners at some point. You know, they have just watched these runners one-shot all their buddies. They might run away because that's fucking terrifying. It depends on their, professional rating. The HTR team sees all the moot guards get gunned down. Eh, they're probably gonna keep going because this is what they do. The moot guards watch the HTR team get gunned down. They're going to panic. Probably. You were trying to say something, Setup?
Nope. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, you know, just keep in mind, the psychological reaction that these guards can have. And then finally, we have drugs. This is kind of a weird place to be, to look into. Jazz is pretty likely for security guards. It's restricted, but that just means you basically have to get a license for it, and any corp that has security guards can get the license for it. Kamikaze, on the other hand,
Also, just a note for anyone: all R and F drugs on extraterritorial land are not necessarily R and F, especially for those corporations. It's their uh, territory. They get to decide the rules. So if they want to, I know for Horizon they have their Cal-free hots. Those are legal drugs on their territory. Uh, Nova Coke is legal in Azatlan, stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, so you have to remember those availabilities. They're pretty much just for Seattle, unfortunately.
yeah, that's a good point. Um, yeah, like Ares, like the alpha isn't forbidden on Ares property. I know that. Um, yeah, lots of stuff like that. um, yeah, so you can actually on Ares property have the HR manager keeps an alpha at his desk because he likes to go shooting at lunch. He likes to go down to the range and shoot at lunch. Um, uh, what was I saying? I blanked out where. Oh, drugs. Things like with other drugs, like beta meth. You're probably not giving your security team beta meth because it's highly addictive, and the book talks very much about what it does to people. And if you have known regular crystal meth addicts in real life, you know that shit melts your brain. If you're, people who get severely addicted to that shit. So again, the cost benefit of the drugs they're giving these. Now, security guards are cheap, but it's still not good if your security is sitting there and can't function because they have a severe addiction to beta meth. Um, so just keep that in mind. I think that's about the end of what I had. Um, so open Q&A. If you want to ask a question in voice, you can just put a Q in the chat, and then I'll call on you, and you can say what you want to say or ask what you want to ask. Well, it looks like I guess we don't have any questions.
Yep. Well, so we have another. Excuse me. We're continuing this series. Next up, I'm gonna try to put together a escalation of force seminar. So, we kind of talked about the, uh, you know, planning a response here today, and I'm going to go into detail about how you, as a GM, could use that plan um, to, kind of make things a little more difficult for a runner team. Um, you know, it's not necessarily make everything difficult, but hopefully I'm going to try to dive into some tactics that you can use on your own table that would fit thematically into the game to make your runners work a little bit harder for that extra new yen. As always, if you have a suggestion for a seminar topic, we are looking for it in Thematics Mod Mail or iPar Mod Mail if you want. Um, you can leave it here in the game chat, um, or you could leave it in the Twitch chat. Uh, this will go up on the Hub YouTube page shortly. I talked to Neon earlier today, and the first seminar is up there. The role of thematics division. That's it's about how we work, how we want to work. Um, I discuss some of our documents and how we handle things like uh, interviews, GM strikes, and what is appropriate for those. Um, and I also kind of go into detail with how we want to work with you guys. Uh, so, and there's also a little bit of the contact reworking in there. So, if you, I'll drop a link to it in the GM chat, so you guys can see that if you missed the first one. Um, Otherwise, thanks for your time, and thank you, Luno, for this wonderful seminar. Wonderful seminar. Man, I can speak English. I got
Yeah,
six
no problem.
ranks.
Also, I just want to say, to everyone listening, if you need help with a run idea or facility, don't hesitate to ask TD or IPAR. That's what we're here for. Well, one of the reasons we're here.
Other note, IPAR is recruiting. We've had one applicant so far. We're working to get him an interview. But if you're interested in that, please feel free to send us a message in Modmail. So, thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for coming and listening.